Have you ever heard your own name coming from the mouth of something that wasn't human? I have. And the worst part is, it's on tape. It was the winter of 1999 in Pagosa Springs, Colorado. I was 27 and working with the Forest Service monitoring wolves. It was just me, a high-8 camcorder, and a cabin in the middle of nowhere. I thought loneliness would be the biggest challenge. I was wrong. That dawn, I went out to film some strange tracks near the creek. The snow glittered under the moon, and the sound of the wind was all there was. Then between the trees, I saw two figures, thin, long, moving wrong, almost floating. At first, I thought they were lost people. I turned on the camera and started filming. The lens shook, but you can see it. They were standing upright, side by side, motionless. And even in the cold, sweat ran down my back. Something about the way they looked didn't add up. They were too attentive. Then one of them turned its face toward me, slowly, like it already knew where I was. And the sound that came out of the recorder froze my blood. It was my voice calling me by name. That winter, I'd been alone on the mountain for almost 2 months. The nearest base was 15 kilometers away, and the road became impassable every time the snow closed off the valley. I lived in a wooden shelter with an oil heater, an emergency radio, and an old Hi-8 camcorder I used to record tracks and the sounds of the wolves that were starting to repopulate the region. Solitude never bothered me. I liked the silence, the wind whispering through the pines, the crack of ice breaking in the creek. I recorded everything. Sometimes I'd spend hours re-watching old tapes just to feel time still moving. But that week, something was different. The trail cameras started failing. The night recordings showed strange noise, static, pops, and a kind of sound that seemed like a voice, but too distant to understand. I assumed radio interference. The day before it happened, I found fresh tracks at the edge of the woods. They weren't wolf. They were bigger, deeper, and the spacing between them was like someone walking upright. But the prints had claws. I spent the rest of the day trying to convince myself they were illegal hunters, maybe a lost group, but something gnawed at me. No hunter would leave tracks that close to the cabin or move without any sound at all. That night, the wind stopped suddenly. Not even the branches moved. The temperature dropped fast and the generator started to fail. I turned on the heater, made coffee, and tried to write my daily report, but the feeling of being watched was unbearable. Around midnight, the radio picked something up. A pop, then a slow, deep breath. I thought it was wind hitting the mic. Then out of nowhere, I heard a short, almost human sound. A muffled laugh. I stood still for a few seconds trying to process it. Then I turned everything off and listened, waiting for it again. But what came next was worse. A sound outside, near the window. The very sound a camera makes when it starts recording. And that's how it started. Next morning, I went out to check the perimeter. The sun had barely risen and ice covered everything, even the fence wire. The wolf tracks I usually found had vanished. In their place were 2 long parallel trails going back and forth between the creek and the clearing. The impressions were deep, like human feet, but narrow, irregular, as if each step had been made by something. Still learning to walk that way, I followed them to the creek where they ended abruptly, as if the figures had disappeared into the water. But the surface was frozen. No sign of a break, no hole. I went back to the cabin with the feeling I was being followed. It wasn't paranoia. The sounds behind me matched my steps, always just a little late, like an echo that breathed. When I stopped, the sound stopped too. That afternoon, I reviewed the tape from the night before. The image shook, full of noise, but you could make out 2 figures on the far side of the creek, motionless, watching. Thin, very thin, with their bodies covered in something dark. You couldn't tell if it was clothing or skin. The mic also picked up the wind and, mixed with it, a weak voice, almost swallowed by static. I replayed the section several times, boosting the volume, until I realized what it said. Ethan. It was my name. My stomach flipped. I turned off the recorder and pulled the tape. I looked around the cabin, the windows, the door, the ceiling. Nothing, no sign. Just the radio hissing in the background, like someone trying to tune back in. That night, I didn't sleep. The wind started up again, and with it came that same sound. Deep, long, rhythmic breathing. The external cameras I'd set up began to blink, one by one. I went out with my rifle and flashlight. The snow reflected the beam in a nearly blinding white. About 50 meters away, near the tree line, I saw two silhouettes standing still. And the instant the light hit them, they crouched like animals trying to hide while still upright. I should have gone back inside, but curiosity beat fear. And that's when I made the mistake of turning the camera back on. The tape starts shaky. Snow falling slowly, the flashlight beam cutting the dark. I remember the sound of my breathing exactly. Short, ragged, blended with the mic's hum. The lens tries to focus, and far back between the trees, you can see the two of them. Standing, they didn't move. They just stared at me. The camera zooms enough to catch their outlines, narrow shoulders, necks too long, and a constant movement in their chests like their whole bodies were breathing. When I took a step, they drew back a little, then advanced again in the same cadence. I thought they might be hunters in heavy clothes, maybe wearing masks. But there was no flashlight, no weapon, no glint of metal, just the white of the snow and the dry crunch of something grinding ice with each step. I kept filming. The image wobbles, and for a second both figures crouch again. One of them puts its hands on the ground, but the joints seem to bend the wrong way. The mic catches a crack, bones or wood, I don't know. Then the wind stopped suddenly, everything went mute. That's when the second figure straightened completely. Its head turned too slowly to be natural until it lined up with the camera. The tape catches my whisper. My God. And then comes the sound. A hoarse, low voice, cutting through the mic like static. Ethan! By reflex, I dropped the camera in the snow. The video shows a white field and the sound of my running. But underneath, you can hear short, clipped laughs, spaced apart, followed by another voice repeating my name again. I stumbled back to the cabin, rifle slung over my shoulder. I locked everything, closed the curtains, and sat there listening to the tape in the dark. It was my voice they were repeating. Exact, same timbre, same tone. And what terrified me most wasn't hearing the name. It was realizing that on the recording, one of them whispers right before the end, "Look behind you." I watched that tape until almost dawn. Every time I hit pause, I found a new detail. A movement in the background, a strange reflection on the ice, a sound I didn't remember hearing while filming. Fear makes your mind invent things, I told myself. It was just wind-distorting sound. That's all. I grabbed the camera manual and tried to explain the noises away. Tape, defects, low-temperature noise, electrostatic interference. But none of that explained how they knew my name. I had never said it out loud while recording. When the sun rose, I went out to retrieve the trail cameras. 3 were on the ground, taken apart, like someone had ripped them off the trees by hand. 1 was still blinking. I pulled the card and pocketed it. In the frozen still frame, almost invisible, 2 figures standing looking straight into the sensor. And a second before the recording. Cut out, one of them steps forward, too fast. I went back to the cabin, shaking, locked everything, lay down with the rifle beside me, trying to force my body to rest. But sleep came too quickly, and with it, the sound. The same voice from inside the room, whispering beside the bed. "Ethan!" I woke up shouting, sweeping the floor with the rifle, but there was nothing. Just the echo of my own name stuck in the air. I spent the rest of the day burning the old tapes, one by one, thinking that would erase what I'd seen. But the tape from the night before, I couldn't. It stayed there on the table, like a mirror I couldn't bring myself to break. If you've ever had something you'd rather forget,
a memory that stalks you even in the house sounds, then you understand me. And if you want to keep hearing the stories no one else dares to tell, leave a like. It's how I know there are still people awake on the other side of the screen. That night, the tape started playing by itself, the sound hissing,
the image shaking, and between the cracks of ice outside, the voice repeated the same call. "Ethan!" Only this time, it came from behind the camera. When I realized the tape had started on its own, my blood ran cold. The camera viewfinder flickered, and the image showed the inside of the cabin. Me, sleeping. The angle was from inside, somewhere between the window and the door. My heart nearly tore out of my throat. I ran to the table and yanked the power cord, but the tape kept spinning. The spool turning dry, without electricity. The sound coming from the speaker wasn't the recording. It was live. Slow footsteps on the porch wood. A creak, then another, like the weight of something very light testing each board before coming in. I grabbed the rifle and blew out the lamp. Only the glow of the camera screen lit the room. The audio kept rolling, and under the wind noise, a male voice repeated my name more firmly, like it was practicing the shape of the word. Lan. The window groaned. A shadow slid across it fast, and the cold cut in like a blade. I fired. The gunshot filled the room, but the sound returned seconds later from another corner, up on the roof. The radio hissed on the table. Inside the static, the same sound as the tape, now doubled. Two voices trading my name back and forth, like one was teaching the other how to speak. I bolted outside, sinking to my knees in the snow. The moon lit the field, and there, between the trees, they were, standing still. Tall, thin, with narrow shoulders and arms far too long. The rifle slipped from my hand. They started walking, but they left no tracks. With each step, the snow moved beneath them like smoke. And then the tape sound changed. The camera, still running inside the cabin, showed the empty room and a shadow passing through the wall. Across the field, one of the two stopped and lifted its head, and the sound that came was the same as the tape. Perfect. No noise, no flaw. "Look behind you, Ethan." When I turned, the cabin window was open, and inside it, for an instant, something was filming me. I ran without looking back. The snow clutched at my legs, the air burned my chest, but fear moved the body on its own. I heard the wind change, a harsh, low whistle that seemed to follow me. Every step I took, they took too. It wasn't a chase, it was shadowing. I fell near the frozen creek. The water under the ice still moved, slow, like a buried heart. I looked at the reflection and saw the sky, and behind me, two dark, tall shapes with stretched faces, no expression, mouths too wide to be human. I fired again. The sound died in the valley without echo. I aimed the flashlight and they drew back, as if the light hurt. But when the beam faltered, they came forward again, slowly, walking on the ice without leaving marks. That's when I understood. They weren't hunting me, they were imitating me. Every gesture, every sound, every breath. The echo I'd been hearing since day one was never wind. It was learning. I made it back to the cabin as the sun started to rise. The door was open, the camera still on, the tape spinning non-stop. The image showed the empty field and, in the distance, me filming, flashlight in hand. The angle was impossible. Someone had filmed me filming. I watched in silence to the end. In the last second of the tape, before the image dies, one of the figures approaches the lens and smiles. The sound that comes out is low, human. "Don't sleep anymore, Ethan." After
that, I left the mountain, turned in my gear, burned the tapes and never went back. But there's one thing fire can't erase: sound. To this day, when wind blows through the windows of my house, I hear that whisper repeat my name right by my ear. Sometimes I wake up thinking I'm still being filmed, that somewhere that tape is still recording. And if you know what it's like to live with the fear of being remembered by something that shouldn't exist, Stick around and leave a like so I know.
Someone's still listening. Because the worst part isn't what I saw, it's knowing that thing still knows who I am. It's been 26 years since that night, and I still avoid any place where snow touches the ground. I live now in a hot city, surrounded by people and noise, but sometimes the silence comes back. The same mountain silence, the same one that came right before I heard my name. I've never picked up a camera again. The tape from that dawn was seized by the Forest Service, but they say no one could play it. The audio froze at the same point, and the final sound, that "look behind you," kept appearing even with the recorder turned off. Sometimes, when the wind hits the window, I feel like I'm still there. Like that night didn't end, just repeats in a different way. And the worst part is knowing they didn't need the snow anymore to find me. It was enough that I remembered. There are things that don't want to be forgotten. They want to be seen. They want your name. And if you've listened this far, leave a like, subscribe, and ring the bell. That way, you help me keep telling what remains. And maybe, just maybe, keep the light on for one more night. Because since I saw that thing through the lens, I learned a simple truth. Sometimes, it's the memory that watches you back.